As you're all aware, and we've heard several times mention of the industrial strategy and the future of urban mobility and its challenges. In the future of urban mobility, we have support for cleaner transport, automation, new business models, and new modes of travel, which have the potential to transform how people and goods and services move. All sounds great so far. However, one thing really holding that back in terms of transport is the traffic regulation order system. A big piece of work commissioned by the DFT, the North Highland report, looked at what was going on around the country and found that we have a system that is quite inefficient and is very expensive to manage from the early stages of initially knowing where you want to put a TRO, through to the consultation and through to its inaction on the road with signs and lines. From the work we've been doing, we do know quite a lot about the scope of the TRO market and what's involved. We know that there are, in over 400 authorities, we have 14,300 TROs at a projected cost of £62.7 million. And the temporary TROs, the ones for the roadworks, are estimated at around 39,000 and a cost of 63. I'm not very good with big numbers, am I? Good job I'm not in charge of finance at the BPA. 63.7 million. So it's a problem, and it's a big problem. And the BPA is a trade organisation that's a non-for-profit, and its membership includes local authorities, parking consultants, manufacturers, and what better place to all sit down and think about this problem and think about what we could do to fix it. And at the same time, GeoPlace were sitting down and thinking about the same problem because we have some very much shared interests. So that was the birth of the TRO Discovery Project. And the TRO Discovery Project, and you've heard about Discovery quite a lot already in other initiatives, is understanding the state of the nation, where the problems are, but also where the best practice is, so that we can learn from that and move forward. Baz is going to take you through the user research in a minute, but just to tell you about the wonderful deliverables from this project, we have a guide for local authorities which looks at the current legislation, what you can do with TROs at the moment, learning from the best practice and learning from the user research as it went along. And we have a draft data model, which Tom will touch on a bit later on, which is looking at, next slide, these various aspects of the TRO process. So we've got something that covers the legal order, the details of the time validity and so on, the physical implementation, and the actual impact of the data model. And I have with me both the guide and the data model printed out if you want to have a little leaf through and have a chat with me and Karen about BPA membership. We're available throughout the day. And I'm going to move swiftly along to Baz, who's going to tell you all about the findings and the recommendations of the TRO research. Over to you, Baz.
So, let me start by saying hello. Some familiar faces from TDI number 9, where we were kind of at the start of the TRO Discovery Project. I just wanted to say thank you to the TDI team for giving us the opportunity to present the findings of the user research in this forum. So, traffic regulation orders. 3 words which, when speaking to ordinary people like my wife and friends, you can see eyes glaze over, reach for a drink, head for the nearest exit. On the plus side, in a room like this, with experts, peers and people in the know, I'm really hoping for a different reaction, so let's see how we go. As part of the TRO Discovery Project, we had an absolutely fantastic response rate to the consultations we put out in order to develop an understanding of the challenges the industry faces. So we led user interviews, so 1-hour phone calls, set up a series of workshops, attended conferences and events, and those surveys. So the initial consultation in December 2018 led to the partnership between DFT, GeoPlace and BPA, setting up interviews, conversations with over 200 people across 92 organisations and commissioning Transport Focus to go out to over 3,000 road users to seek their views. A fantastic collaboration which I'm really pleased to share the results of today. So, we've got a limited supply of printed copies of the final report available from our stand where the refreshments are, and there is a link to the document in the supplied deck. So just give you an indication of the interviews, survey response rates and the coverage that of interactions we had with local authorities across GB. As I said, we've got some printed copies. If you've got any questions about the report, I'm sure there'll be time for a little Q&A at the end, but I've included my email address here. And if you want to know about the other work that GeoPlace do and the other government initiatives that we're involved with and how location data relating to address and street information can help, please get in touch. We look after the National Street Gazetteer and create the National Address Register, which Ordnance Survey take to market in the form of the address-based suite of products. So if you've heard of the Unique Street Reference Number, USRN, you've heard of the Unique Property Reference Number, UPRN, that is what we look after. So with the pitch done, now on to the task at hand, traffic regulation orders, what do we find? Key themes and insights, really. Our findings were broadly spread across 4 areas: data, legislation, future of mobility, and consistency, or rather inconsistency. So let me start with data. We found that availability of data and lack of data in a standardised manner was a barrier. Authorities have an obligation to provide information to members of the public so they are consulted with. Utilities require TRO and TTRA to effectively plan their street works, associated diversion routes which support the reduction of congestion. Map makers require TRO and TTRA data to turn it into accurate navigation information for their users. Not all local authorities currently publish TRO information in a digital format. When we say digital format, what do we actually mean by digital format? Are we talking about shape files? Are we talking about PDF documents that have been scanned from paper-based documents from 1937? Where data is available, like I said, it is inconsistent. Okay. The creation of a TTRO is an intrinsic requirement of the streetworks process when a road closure or temporary restriction is required on the highway. How can this be brought together to enable better coordination? The coordination of works and the better provision of data is key to delivering streetworks efficiently. Enabling effective coordination and collaboration through the provision of data from the TTRO application stage could have a positive impact, is seen to have a positive impact on the streetworks process, saving money, time and resource for all parties. Utilities and event organisers need to communicate timelines internally and externally to facilitate coordination and enable delivery of services and successful events. They need prompt confirmation that a TTRO has been made so they can plan dependent activities with certainty. We found that there were inconsistencies in lead-in times for the application and the duration of the time to process an application between local authorities. Utilities and events organisers need clarity, consistency about the application process for each authority they operate in, so they can efficiently provide application information and payment to the correct part of the relevant authority. This is then passed on to the client and customers. Utilities need an evidence base around costs that are incurred when passing the cost of streetworks on to their customers. And the cost of TTROs vary considerably across authorities, and each authority could have a minimum and maximum charge. So from a mapmaker perspective, they want and require advanced sight of proposed TROs and TTROs and changes to existing TROs and TRO information, so they can update their mapping provision for their users. There's a critical road safety aspect here. TROs are created to keep all of us safe when we use the road network. So my route to the local train station as part of my everyday commute takes 12 minutes and 35 seconds. I pass 43 directives about what I can and cannot do on the road network as either a pedestrian or a car user. Yellow lines, no parking, no waiting, 20-mile-an-hour signs, 30-mile-an-hour signs, no entry, cycle paths, shared pedestrian cycle paths, one-ways, no left turn, and then we've recently had some roadworks. But what about restrictions that don't need a traffic regulation order? The Traffic Signs, Regulations and General Directions, 2016, so the TSRGD, give local authorities autonomy to create restrictions on the network that don't require a TRO. In order to provide complete restriction data to map makers in the future, How is this additional information that isn't subject to a TRO going to be passed? Map makers want network change data to update their maps. However, this data extends beyond that held in TROs. What about restriction information that isn't created or controlled by local authorities or the traffic authority? As a user of the road network with either a sat-nav or a smart phone with a map capability, do you really care where a boundary starts and finishes? Whether a restriction is in place on a public or private highway? All you want to know there's a restriction in place and you want this information to be made available to you and you want it to be accurate. A key issue relating to accuracy is the physical implementation of the signs and lines versus what the order is actually saying. For data to be of any value and to be used in a meaningful way, orders and the signs and lines need to marry up. For TROs to be legally enforceable, local authorities require the signs and lines on the ground to reflect the content of the order. There's a nervousness in local authorities in exposing bad data due to potential legal and financial implications. Map makers, CAV, software suppliers, solution providers, they want accurate and high quality data to ensure effective and legally compliant navigation for customers. Where there is a difference between the real world and the data, what is right, what is perceived to be right. Map makers in the CAV sector want more detailed information relating to TTROs and whether the disruption taking place on the network is actually happening. TTRO information provides an indication to a user that there will be a disruption on the network, but it doesn't tell you that it is actually going to be happening. How many times have you actually been caught up in a diversionary route or a set of roadworks? There's absolutely nothing happening at that point in time. In a society where we aim for better, faster, leaner ways of doing things, there's a real opportunity for us to improve journeys, and key to this is the quality of data that we turn into information. Quality is an intrinsic aspect of the insight within the data theme. We need to better understand the requirements of data quality from the users of TRO data. Only then will we be able to gauge how we might achieve it. Data quality issues relating to TROs could have serious consequences with the introduction of CAV and emerging requirements for road safety data. For example, the Intelligent Speed Assist Initiative. There is a perception that data subject to a legal process will be definitive. So, as part of the collaboration with the BPA in their production of the TRO guide, we defined a scale for digital maturity, and this can actually be found in the guide itself. Essentially, a tiered system to help local authorities define how digital their TRO offering actually is. I won't spend too much time on this, but what we did find is that the inconsistency of digital TRO records held in local authorities couldn't support and cannot support the current and future needs of road users. The lack of standards and best practice to capture data plays a massive part in this too. Local authority drivers influence the degree of digital maturity. Essentially, if there's a local business case for digitising data, i.e. parking enforcement, it's more likely to be done over something like the capture of speed data. There is more work to be done to understand how mature the TRO data sphere actually is. It's evident there is a thirst for data within various industries. And most importantly, in my view, authorities have a statutory obligation to provide information to members of the public, so they're notified and consulted on changes to the network that may affect them. There's a clear need to make the data available. It's not just about the technical means to do this, but what can the industry then do with the data? Who owns it? How should it be used? A question that needs to be answered. And there's some really good work being done by Ordnance Survey and the Geospatial Commission, which plays a big part in the wider government sphere to unlock data through the public sector geospatial agreements. But this should also be looked at through the lens of the National Data Strategy, which the Department of Culture, Media and Sport have recently resurrected, and take some of the learnings from this morning as something that the DFT data strategy should also look at. So, future of mobility. Authorities need to make the best possible use of limited space on their network to keep their authority road networks moving and keep their citizens happy. We all use a network. Commuting, dropping our kids off to school, getting a delivery, getting a takeaway, a weekend away. We use the network for various services that we want to receive. Space needs to be used flexibly, altering the restrictions that apply to the road on a dynamic basis according to factors such as parking bay, occupancy and demand, or even air quality. Road users want a road network which reflects and facilitates the journeys they make. If the restriction on the network can change dynamically, dynamic information needs to be made available, either physically or digitally. It's currently unclear to what extent TRO legislation constrains the ability of authorities to make dynamic TROs. So currently TRO data is published in a variety of ways, which causes complexity to map makers who will ultimately provide TRO data to the CAV sector. It's not clear how regulations such as TROs will apply to CAVs. Therefore, the way that the CAV sector will use TRO data is currently subject to a degree of uncertainty. The CAV industry will need infrastructure data to help their vehicles effectively navigate a changing road network. The data that CAVs are provided with will need to be accurate, secure and efficient to process. And the CAV industry will also need to know how road regulations, including TROs, will be enforced against CAVs. Senior people in organisations that have a holistic view on how TRO data can be used or should be used in the world of CAV, but in the conversations we've had at operational level, the need for TRO data itself is a little unclear, which presents a great opportunity to continue dialogue in this sector. UK government has the ambition to deliver full fibre to the premises by 2025. Note in the published version of the document, we hadn't got that memo from number 10, so it currently reads 2033, for all new cars and vans to be effectively zero emission by 2040. This will meet the needs of UK citizens and businesses who want to access all the benefit of ultra-fast services without unnecessary cost and delay. Broadband companies want to deliver these services in a timely and cost-effective way. Utility companies delivering these rollouts experience inconsistencies in the cost and timing to apply for TTROs. This has the potential to impact on the speed and cost of future rollouts. So, onto the theme of legislation. Authorities need to make their TTROs efficiently and without unnecessary delay or administration which impose a burden on them. They have a legal duty to manage their networks to secure the expeditious movement of traffic. Road users need to be effectively communicated with about changes to the road network, and local authorities believe that the most efficient and simplest way to communicate changes to the road network is to do this via the use of map-based orders. The creation of map-based orders facilitate the creation of a digital record of TRO information. Many authorities communicate the scope of a TRO through written text-based schedules where map-based schedules have not been introduced. Is this the most effective way of communicating information? Citizens want to know about changes to the road network that affect them and need to be effectively communicated with by local authorities. Authorities need an efficient and cost-effective process to communicate with their residents. Utilities and events organisers want to obtain TTROs at reduced cost and will then no longer need to pass on this cost to their customers. Road users who responded to a transport focus survey told us that there are 8 methods that would better meet their needs for communicating changes about the network than an official notice in a local paper. However, regulations mandate these official local paper notices. Local authorities have been forced to align their TRO consultation process with the timings of newspaper publications, and there are some authority areas where local newspapers don't exist. Only 7% of road users find out about plans for roadworks and future road network changes through an official notice in the local paper. The estimated annual advertising cost for TROs and TTROs across all authorities in GB is approximately £49 million, and this accounts for 34% of the total cost to make a TRO and 46% of the total cost to make a TTRO. Big numbers, and I think I got those right. Authorities, 49 million. Yeah. Authorities want simplicity, clarity and consistency in the different types of statutory powers that are used to control and manage their networks. This does not currently exist in the collection of powers that are available under primary legislation, statutory instruments and guidance. Complexity and a lack of clear guidance leads to inconsistency. Research shows that local authorities would benefit from guidance that explains what legislation should be used and when, the steps in the process to create, consult where required and implement a TRO, a TTRO or an experimental order, map-based schedules and the stages of digital maturity. This will be particularly helpful to local authorities in order to 1, ensure the correct legislative processes are being followed, 2, enable a mechanism to create policy where it doesn't yet exist, and 3, provide new and existing local authorities, officers, a useful tool to navigate a complex statutory obligation. Drawing on the research of the TRO discovery projects, the British Parking Association have created the guidance document to meet this identified user need. So we put a summary of recommendations together. It's a little bit difficult to read there, and due to time, I would just invite you all to take a look at the document. It's not saying how something should be done, it's saying what should be done next. And these are recommendations that we put forward to DFT. And then we created a summary of next step activities. So initiating pilot activities, undertaking a review of existing legislation, conduct further research into what additional network change data needs to be provided on top of TRO information, conduct further research into the processes, and for the British Parking Association to release the guide and the draft data model. So, thank you. I'd now like to hand over to Tom, who's going to take you through the next steps.
Thanks so much indeed, Baz. And thank you for having me here to speak today. As introduced, I'm Tom Pinchbeck. I'm a pothole strategy delivery manager, and it is my mission to deliver a pothole to every household in the UK. And I'm going to achieve that sometime soon. It's also a mission to carry out the TRO Policy Alpha. As Baz said, there's a couple of recommendations that came out of the report that DFT has very, very quickly taken forward, clearly recognised the value in this work. So what we'll be doing is undertaking a review of existing legislation, ensuring it's fit for purpose, and then additionally identifying proposals for future improvements, whether those improvements to enable data provision or to ensure that local authorities have the tools to manage their networks in a changing world. So we started this piece of work about 6 weeks ago now, and we're going to be finished by the end of this year, hopefully. And what I want to do with you today is go through the process by which we're arriving at legislative solutions to the problems that we've identified so far. So the first question to answer is, what is a policy alpha? We've used these words discovery and alpha a couple of times, so I thought it worth just taking the time to explain. This beautiful diagram here, produced by GDS, Government Digital Services, which you mentioned earlier, shows the process by which we go through to go from user needs at one end over to a service that meets those user needs at the other. So you can see the second stage there is discovery, which Baz has just explained. It's about identifying user needs, identifying how far they're met already, and also where they're not being met as well. And we're currently at this next stage, alpha. And what this stage is all about is trying out a huge range of different solutions to the problems we've identified. So at the moment, I think we've got about 60 potential solutions, which obviously is a huge number, and they range from abolishing TROs on the one hand, which don't worry, probably won't happen, through to gold-plated versions at the other as well. So we're exploring lots of ideas. Not necessarily everyone will actually happen, but it's all worth thinking about at this stage. So in developing our initial set of options, we're basing these on, firstly, user needs and current frustrations. And Baz gave you a really thorough indication of what's needed currently and the issues that are faced. For example, there's a need for open, high-quality data, and the lack of it is a frustration for many people in this room here today. The other things that we're feeding into these initial options we're developing for change are changes that have taken place over the last 35 years. In 1984, the Road Traffic Regulation Act was written, and quite a lot's changed since then. Perms are no longer cool. I can't see any of them at all. And there's a lot of other stuff that's changed as well. So societal changes. People's expectations of what government should offer have changed quite a lot over those 35 years. And also the way people live has changed. People now commute far further, which means that information about road changes is needed from a much wider area. We've also seen a lot of technological changes as well. So self-driving cars we mentioned earlier, and also smartphones as well. I can see everyone's got them on the table, ready for the interactive session later, but that just didn't exist 35 years ago. And it's all these different changes that we're taking into account when developing options for legislative change. So what we're doing is testing all these initial options with people who are experts via phone interviews, Skype interviews, and workshops, with people who are actually going to be using this process and using this data in the future as well. Because I think what's crucial is that it's not just DFT mandating this stuff, it's DFT working with the sector to ensure that the options we create are right. So Baz mentioned the cost of newspaper advertising. Was it 49 million, Baz, something like that? Yeah, it's quite a lot. So we're looking at options around that, testing them with users, understanding which the best ones to take forward are. And then once we've done that, we're creating a proposed new end-to-end process for what the legislation for TROs could look like. And then again, testing that with the people who use it to make sure we've got a cogent set of ideas about this legislation which enables the managing of the road network. So you guys were warned, there's now a bit of participation going on. So Nikolai and Nora, I think it warmed you up for this sort of thing. It's very, very similar. So if we can just switch over to the Menti pack. Great. So as Julian mentioned right at the start, can I ask you to go to menti.com, which is that address right at the top, and enter the code 939501 for a bit of participation. And then once you're there, can you give me a thumbs up just to let me know that you got there? Would you mind just pressing the activate the slide button as well at the bottom there? Great, thank you. Cool, you can see some thumbs up coming through, which is great. So it's menti.com and 939501. Yep. And as I was saying earlier, the work we're doing, it's crucial that we speak to people like you who've got expertise in this area, so we develop proposals that are informed by real life experience. So we're doing a little bit of that today. Great, huge numbers of thumbs up, that's very, very exciting. The address and sort of code will stay there at the top. So if you flick onto the next slide, you can just join in at any moment that suits you. Fantastic. So which of these is most frustrating to your authority? So as we heard, there's a lot of issues that are faced in this area. And what's really important for us to understand is which is the most important for you to address. So you can see a clear winner sort of appearing already. But do take the time just to think about these issues that we face in producing TROs, and therefore which ones DFT should be looking at addressing most urgently. So I'll just give you 2 minutes to do that. And don't feel the need to rank them all. If you want to pick 2 or 3 that you think are particularly important to put at the top, then that's still great. Cool. So I'll just wait for a couple more answers there. Okay, great. So, unsurprisingly, I guess, given that we are at TDI, inaccessible data is the biggest issue that is faced, which is entirely understandable. I suppose what I would say, based on that, is that while that's a priority for you guys, there are lots of other different types of users in this area. So if I was to put this in front of a utility audience, for example, they might come up with a different set of sort of prioritised needs. But no, really good, interesting to understand what's the most important thing to address there. Okay, great. And if we could just flick on to the next question, please. So this question here is about whether accessible TRO data would benefit your organisation, whether that's through better network management, whether that's through, good, lots of strongly agrees already, like that, better network management, better enforcement, better navigation services, all those sorts of things. And if we've done our job well so far today, hopefully there'll be lots of strongly agrees. If not, I guess we need to talk for a bit longer, possibly. Okay, great, 54 responses, that's good. So yeah, strongly agree. It's great to see that everyone in this room understands understands the value of this data, because we think it's a really important data set, and that's what our findings from the discovery showed as well.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Can somebody say why they strongly disagree?
Yeah, certainly. So would anyone like to put a comment on that at all? And no offence will be taken at all if people strongly disagree? Okay, or someone who's ambivalent possibly.
It was a Russian bot.
And perhaps anyone who's ambivalent about it, who doesn't quite understand the value of it, would they like to share views possibly? Okay, no worries at all. And obviously, if you do any views on this, then do email me afterwards if you'd rather sort of say them private, share your views privately. But yeah, please do get in touch. Okay. And then let's just flick on to the last question, if that's okay, which is, what would help your authority to produce high-quality data about TROs? So this one's free text. Just throw out a few ideas about what would help you. And this can be anything. It can range from legislation at one end to support you, or guidance at the other, or anything else that you think might be valuable. So do take 2 minutes, chat to the person next to you about the sorts of things that you think might be useful in this area. So I'll just give you 1 more minute to throw a few more ideas up there. Okay, so it's a great set of options up there. And it's always really nice, isn't it, when people give you the answers you want. So the 3 big ones there, standardization, guidance, and legislation. You produced a data standard, which please do go and have a look at on the BPA website. Legislation we're looking at now. And guidance, the BPA's already produced a fantastic guide, which again, do go and look at. So thanks for those comments. We'll go through and review the other ones that were slightly less popular as well and feed those into the work we're doing. So thank you for all your responses there. So if we just flip back to the other presentation, I'll finish that off. So it was really great just for 5 minutes there to hear your views, but actually we don't want this to be a one-off thing. We want a continuing dialogue with people who are going to have to engage with TROs and TRO data. So if you'd be interested in contacting us, to be involved in an interview, a workshop, or to share your views more generally, if you think TRO data is pointless and want to tell me privately exactly why, you can use this email address here. If you want to tell me how great it is, please use this as well. So the email address is troalpha@dft.gov.uk, or please do come and speak to me afterwards as well. And one final word, Julian mentioned the data model. We're now gearing up to pilot the data model with a few local authorities later this year, and that'll help us validate the model and ensure it's fit for purpose in providing high quality data. Okay, thanks very much for listening and for your participation. Any questions?